Hello, it is 12 noon in Cairo. It's 11 a.m. here in London. I'm Monita Rajpal. You're watching CNN, the world's news leader. This is violence returns to the streets of Cairo. Egypt's Prime Minister Issam Sharaf is calling for calm after at least 23 people were killed in violent clashes between army forces and Coptic Christians. These are the scenes in the city last night. What started out as a peaceful protest soon turned violent. Coptic Christians say they were staging a march against the burning of a church when they were set on by men with swords and CNN's clubs. Ben Wiedemann is in Cairo and joins us now live from our bureau. And Ben, we understand that the Grand Imam there is calling for talks with what's known as the Egyptian family. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we know that the Prime Minister, Issam Sharaf, did form several months ago this National Justice Committee.
Coptic Christians represent the Arab world's largest non-Muslim minority. We want to give you a bit more background information on who they actually are. Now, they make up around 9% of the country's 80 million residents, so some 7.2 million people. As for where they usually live, the Copts are geographically dispersed across the country and are not ethnically distinct from other Egyptians. As for their theology, well, Coptic Christians base their religion on the teachings of the Apostle Mark. The religion split with other Christians in the 5th century. In other news this hour, a bank in trouble, talks that lasted long into the night, and then a rescue deal. Franco-Belgian Dexia Bank agreed early on Monday to the nationalization of its Belgian division. Qatari investors are buying the Luxembourg unit. Dexia is the first Eurozone lender to fall victim to the region's two-year-old debt crisis. It has heavy exposure to debt-stricken Greece. Dexia's bailout could put more pressure on other Eurozone governments to beef up their banking sectors. Well, as governments rush to support Dexia, the leaders of France and Germany put on a united front at their Berlin summit, but they didn't offer many details about a possible solution to Europe's deepening crisis. We want to go live now to Berlin and CNN's Fred Plutkin. So what actually came out of this meeting between Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy? Fred?
Well, as you said, Monita, it really wasn't very much in the way of details. The only thing that the two leaders said is that, first of all,
there in Berlin. We want to see what newspapers have to say about all of this. The Wall Street Journal's Europe edition has the headline, "You know what to do? Now just do it." The editorial says any illusions those Eurozone policymakers had as to the health of their banks were dispelled when Belgium and France had to fly to the rescue of Dexia. The International Herald Tribune's headline is "Bank risk is the great unknown." The comment piece says there is clearly a great deal that investors do not know about exposures to Europe. 3 years ago, investors were ignorant of the risks in faulty mortgage securities. If there is anything learned from that episode, it's that what you don't know can, in fact, hurt you. And finally, in Greece, the Kat Imerini newspaper has the headline, "Endgame in the long debt saga." The article goes on to say, "We assume nobody would like to be in Merkel's and Sarkozy's shoes, but whatever they decide, they will have to make sure it will be the end game of the Greek debt saga." Remember, you can read all those articles in full at facebook.com/W1CNN. Well, while politicians talk, the worsening debt crisis takes on a dimension far deeper than numbers on a screen. CNN's senior international correspondent Dan Rivers puts the human face on this growing economic turmoil.
Thank you.
For Rebecca Saunders, this small bag of food is critical.
Got pasta, tin of tomatoes, some fresh ham.
She shows me the weekly food handed out by the charity FareShare. Without their intervention, all this perfectly edible food would be thrown away by supermarkets because of overstocking.
You're watching World One live from London. This oil slick could spell disaster for marine life in the waters around New Zealand. Conditions are hampering efforts to contain an oil spill off the coast of New Zealand. The environmental toll of the spill is becoming increasingly apparent. Hundreds of wildlife volunteers are on standby as the oil starts to reach the coastline. As TVNZ's Donna Marie Lever reports, the first victims have already begun to come ashore.
He's been doused in sunlight, soap and canola oil.
How does the disaster compare to some of the most infamous oil spills? In the 1991 Gulf War, the Iraqi army destroyed tankers and wells, releasing some 1,200 71 million liters of oil into the Persian Gulf. That's considered the largest spill ever. An explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig last year spilled more than 636 million liters of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. That was the biggest oil spill in American history. A deepwater well called Oct10 blew out off the coast of Mexico in June 1979, spilling 529 million liters of oil there. The Amoco Cadiz ran aground off the coast of France in 1978, dumping 260 million liters of oil. And then, of course, you must remember the Exxon Valdez spill that ran aground in Prince William Sound, Alaska in March 1989. That spilled 40 million liters. Well, as we mentioned, a strong storm is bearing down on New Zealand at this hour. Here to explain the impact that it could have on the vessel and the spill, meteorologist Pedram Javaheri joins us now from the World Weather Center. Pedram.
Yeah, Monita, the storm system beginning to push in right now, and you've got to keep in mind in the southern hemisphere, we're talking about transitioning right from...
All right, Pedram, thank you very much for that. You're watching World One live from London. Coming up, legend Paul McCartney is now a newlywed for a third time. He exchanged vows with his with New York heiress Nancy Chevelle in London on Sunday. Here's a quick look at some of the Monday's papers here in the UK are covering the event. I wish they would be a little bit more imaginative with their headlines. Here, the Daily Mirror, love, lovely do. And then here, the Daily Telegraph, all you need is love. They could come up with something more, but I guess you've got the lyrics there to tell you the story. Well, CNN's Erin McLaughlin was among the well-wishers on the big day.
It was a day steeped in history for the former Beatle.
It was CNN's Erin McLaughlin reporting there for us from London. The McCartneys threw a big bash on Sunday night to celebrate. You're watching World One. Here are some of the stories that we are talking about. California has become the first state in the United States to make it illegal for minors between the ages of 14 and 18 to use tanning beds. The state says it's based on studies showing that tanning beds increase the risk of skin cancer, particularly when used by young people. Elsewhere, governments have taken similar actions, with Brazil banning tanning beds altogether. Next time you're in London and pass by Big Ben, take a closer look. Surveyors say the famous clock tower is leaning almost half a meter because it is settling into the ground unevenly. There's no reason to panic, though. At its current rate, it would take thousands of years for the tower to reach its tipping point. Now, what would you do if you found a moose in your swimming pool? Well, the owner of this pool in the U.S. state of New Hampshire called police and firefighters after the animal crashed through his fence and jumped into his pool over the weekend. It took 9 people to pull the animal out of the water. The moose then just shook himself off and walked back into the woods, as you do. Archbishop of Canterbury has traveled to Zimbabwe in an effort to bring unity to the local Anglican church. The spiritual leader of the world's Anglicans, Rowan Williams, is expected to meet with Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe to discuss the religious rift. CNN's Nkapile Mabuse has more now from CNN Johannesburg in neighboring South Africa. And Nkapile, do we know if this meeting is actually going to take place?
I can't hear a thing.
All right, we do apologize for that audio technical problem there. We will want to have more now on the meeting between the potential meeting between Rowan Atkinson and Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. Here's this report. Supporters of the Occupy Wall Street movement are showing no signs of giving up. Demonstrators are now encouraging children to attend with a Kids Speak Out Day. U.S. politicians are becoming increasingly divided over the movement and what it actually means. Several Democrats say they support the protesters' call for change, but some Republican politicians are describing the protests as class warfare. Organizers say these protesters come from all walks of life. CNN's Susan Candiotti is in New York and talked to some of them.
Eating a bowl of cereal after sleeping under the stars.
Violence in Syria is continuing to escalate, with reports of at least 31 people killed during clashes over the weekend. Syrian security forces were involved in heavy shooting using tanks and guns. That's according to local committees. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says at least 31 people have been killed. Welcome back. Let's take a look at sports now. In the United States, sparks were flying in the Major League Baseball playoffs. No shortage of runs scored in the National League Championship Series. Pedro Pinto has more. I have no idea what I just said.
Well, we're having a good time. It's Monday morning. Let me tell you all about the baseball playoffs. 15 runs were scored in the opening game. Japan and Monita, you really don't see someone like Rafael Nadal lose so many finals. So that has been quite strange to see.
Yes, what's going on with him?
His work ethic has really been what has been the deciding factor. A lot of times in his career, physically, he's been superior to his opponents.
Welcome back. You're watching World 1 live from London. We are approaching almost 7 a.m. in New York, 1 p.m. in Berlin, and almost 8 p.m. in Tokyo. It is every driver's worst nightmare, running out of fuel halfway through a journey. So imagine the horror for this pilot when it happened to him mid-flight between California and Hawaii. We want to take a look at what's trending on social media right now. At number 3, one of our most popular stories on CNN.com is Hurricane Jova. The Category 3 storm is rapidly growing in strength as it heads towards the coast of Mexico. Forecasters say Jova is expected to make landfall Tuesday afternoon. Emergency officials are scrambling to open shelters and coordinate with local governments. At number 2, the Rugby World Cup. As the competition heats up, the hashtag RWC 2011 has become one of the most popular. Speculation about who might win is rife as fans look towards the semi-finals this weekend. New Zealand, Australia, Wales, and France are all still in the running. And at number 1, all these years later, and he's still grabbing headlines and the World Wide Web, Sir Paul McCartney walked down the aisle Sunday for the 3rd time. The ex-Beatle married his American girlfriend, Nancy Chevelle, on what would have been John Lennon's 71st birthday. You're watching World 1 live from London. I'm Monita Rajpal. Thank you for joining us, and do stay with CNN. We'll update you the news headlines at the top of the hour. We leave you, though, with another look at that poor moose on the loose.